Well, alright people, welcome to the Critical Focus channel and today's review of the second warband from the new starter set for Warhammer Underworlds. That is the updated Farstriders deck and fighter cards. So, as I did in the previous installment with the Sepulchral Guard, I am now going to focus more on card synergy and how to get the most out of the deck rather than judging the cards in a good or bad kind of manner. I still will touch upon, is it a really useful card or is it a less useful card? For purposes of deck building, I think it still has points, right? Is this synergistic enough to include? Is this strong enough, or is this situational? So that could still have some merit, right? But in a Rivals deck format, we will have to use all the cards. So it makes sense for me to at least touch upon how to use the different cards and how to score the searches and so on and so forth. Let's get starting with the fighter cards, which have been updated slightly. If we start here with looking at the Farstrider, he still has 4 move, 1 shield, 4 health, inspires the 2 shields. His inspired condition is totally revamped though. His Boltstorm pistol has stagger. And all of the fights have stagger on the Boltstorm pistol, as a matter of fact. His hand axe seems to be unchanged, if I am correct here. It goes from 2 hammers 2 damage to 3 hammers 2 damage. Instead of getting an extra attack on his inspired side, it's just changed to be 4 range, 3 swords, 1 damage. It has blinding, which means grievous and stagger, so that's pretty awesome. The inspired condition now reads for all of the fighters. This fighter has made 2 more attack actions with different names in the same phase. So you can actually inspire before the end phase, but it's going to be a bit trickier to inspire all of them at least. So it's a bit of a boon and a bit of a kind of curse. So the good thing is that you don't have to succeed with these attack actions, because it doesn't say that you have to do successful attack actions, just do 2 different attack actions. And we have some stuff in the deck to help us achieve this without spending 2 activations as well. So if you take a look at like the keywords, all of the guys are hunters, and Swiftblade is an assassin as well. Eagle Eyes attacks, the Boltstorm pistol has also stagger, and his short hand axe goes to 3 damage. I think this was the case before as well. Swiftblade, as I said, is a assassin now. His Storm Save goes from 3 swords 2 damage to 3 swords 2 damage with Cleave inspired. So, quite solid fighter cards there, very tanky while inspired. So, fairly good survivability, I would say. So let's check out the rival deck. So, as always, start with the search objectives. So at the top here we see Master of the Hunt, and the rival deck has now been updated to have 6 searches to be really competitive and reliable in a both rival deck, Nemesis or Championship format. So first up we have Master of the Hunt, which is a search duel. You score immediately after a friendly fight's attack action if that was the second or subsequent successful attack made by that fighter in the same phase, and 2 more of those attack actions had different range characteristics. So this is a little bit tricky card, because it needs both of those attacks to be successful. I would rather have seen like this fighter's second or subsequent attack and at least 1 was successful, something like that. Would still not be an auto score, but just slightly as easier to just get the glory going. So let's check what we have to help us achieve this goal. So we have, for example, this one, Ceaseless Volleys, which increase the accuracy. It also includes a push and accuracy to range 3 attacks. We have a Merciless Assault, which is a reaction that you play after you do a range 1 attack, and then you can do a range 3 attack for free. So that's obviously something that is quite synergistic with this search card. A Rapid Volley, it doesn't really help us do 2 different attacks, but it might help us do the range 3 attack successfully at least, because the first one might not be successful, because you can play this after friendly fight's range 3 attack action. It does not need to be a fail or a success really. So either you can like finish off a fighter with it, or you could at least score that search objective that I mentioned. We also have the Retribution to help us make a extra attack. Plays after an enemy fight's attack action that dealt damage to a friendly fighter. That friendly fighter makes 1 attack action. It must target the attacker. So that could be any range, that Retribution attack. So we have quite a lot of stuff to help us achieve this search objective. Still think it's slightly on the hard side, given that both of the attacks need to be successful. Next up we have Ranger Strike. Scores immediately after your warband takes a second or subsequent enemy fight out of action in the same phase. This might be tricky. We only have one fighter with 3 damage inspired as well, so we don't have anyone with 3 damage off the bat. And given that the inspired kind of slow, we don't have massive damage output. So taking 2 fights out in the same phase could prove a bit hard. We have some stuff to help us. All the accuracy I previously mentioned, as well as lightning blow to give us +1 damage to the first attack action. No range restrictions there. We also has like the free ping damage, but it's bound to a leader. It's called Raptor Strike, right? This is like an old reprint. Choose an enemy fighter within 4 hexes of a friendly leader, deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. So that also helps us bring down the enemies, but it's still pretty hard and very matchup dependent to kill 2 fighters in the same phase. So it's going to be one of the weaker searches here for sure. Next up we have Stormforge Vanguard. Scores immediately after an activation step if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens. We've seen this kind of card a lot before, and this is obviously something that's been put into the deck to boost the strength of the warband, and it's very easy to achieve with 3 fighters. Everyone needs to be in enemy territory though as well, but it's still fairly easy, especially once you lose a couple of fighters. It's extremely easy. So that's one of the stronger objectives for sure. Next up we have Swift Punishment. Scores immediately after friendly leader or assassin attack action that takes an enemy fighter out of action. If they kill someone standing on an objective. Well, now that the objectives are back being flipped up and fighters actually want to get onto objectives, not just to have the double assist from the gloom, this will be a situation that kind of occurs more, and we have 2 fighters that are eligible for this killing blow. Either the leader or an assassin, which is Swift Blade then. Possibly if we deck build, we could also make the other guy an assassin, so all of them will be eligible, but that's kind of a niche case here. Still 2 out of 3 fighters being eligible for killing someone. It's fairly doable, right? It's not all that hard. The Judgment of Sigmar is scored immediately after friendly fights range 3 plus attack action takes the target out of action. It's bound to happen as well, right? It's gonna be a bit. It's not the most damage dealing attacks, obviously, but we have like Grievous on the leader's attack, and yeah, we could certainly soften them up with other attacks before finishing off with the range 3, and we have some like reactionary attacks as well to help us achieve this. So this should be fairly doable. Next up we have Veteran Marksman. Scores immediately after friendly fights range 3 plus attack action that resulted in a critical hit. This is the type of card that can be scored immediately, or you could kind of wait your entire game for this to happen. It's just up to the dice really. You can't really do anything about it unless you stack up on like rerolls and extra dice, which there is a bit of extra dice here in the Ploys department. Yeah, but it's gonna be a dicey card really, but it's certainly not unscorable. So let's check the end phases. So interestingly here in the objectives part, no 2 glory searches, because we've kind of seen that a lot with recent warbands, but there's no 2 glory searches here. Next up we have in the end phases Bolts of Azure. Scores an end phase if 1 or more leaders out of action. Really boring card, and it's just 1 glory, and it's also going to be really matchup dependent. If we have a leader standing very defensively way down in the opponent's field, it's going to be hard to kind of get them. We have some stuff to kind of get across the board, like etheric paths and a bit of push tech here with ranges advance and what have you. And we also have Farsighted to give us an extra range on range 3 plus attack action, which then could, for example, give the leader a 5+ range on his inspired side with that blinding keyword on his attack. So that could be really menacing. So I like to think in the terms of threat ranges, right? So threat range is your move characteristic plus the range of your attack. So the leader inspired has a threat range of 4 move plus 3 range. Sorry, plus 4 range with that beaks and bolts or whatever it's called, talons and bolts. So that's kind of crazy. So with that upgrade, he's gonna have 4 move and 5 range on his attack. So that's going to be a threat range of 9 with potentially 2 damage on his 5+ 5 range attack. That's kind of really menacing. So. But still, I think if we kind of get back to the objective here, I think Bolts of Azure is a tad bit weak and it's just 1 glory. We don't really have a lot of tech to help us get extra accuracy versus leader or anything like that. So yeah, it is what it is. It's kind of an old reprint and a bit of a boring card, really. Next up, we have Flash of Light. Scores an offensive 1 or more friendly fights are each in an edge hex in enemy territory. This is going to be really easy to achieve, obviously. Etheric Paths also help us get from one edge hex to another one. It gives us a charge token, but that's not a huge deal because once everyone has a charge token, you can still activate the fighter. Right? So, I think Flash of Light is 1 glory. That's kind of fair for such an easy objective. Next up we have Lightning Advance. Scores an offense if there are 2 more surviving friendly fighters. Always a bit risky when you only have 3 of them. And each of those fighters is an enemy territory. Yeah, we have stuff to help us get there. We have that Etheric Paths. We have Ranges Advance. We have Warning Cry, so maybe we couldn't be driven back once we are in. We have Etheric Step. That gives us the flying trait, could help us get there more speedier. We also have Swift Stride to give us +2 move, which is essential for such a slow warband. So yeah, it should be doable, right? We also have the Incredible Stamina, which is an upgrade with a reaction. Before this fight's activation, remove 1 move or stagger token from this fighter. You can only use this ability once per round. This could also help us get there, right? So yeah, I think it should be 2 glory though. I mean, once we are past the first round, it's gonna be very dice dependent if we actually have 2 surviving fights or not. It's not impossible to bring down 2 4-wound fighters in a single phase. So I think it's always risky with these kind of 2 surviving fighters in 3-man warband. So I'm not a huge fan of this card. Especially not for 1 glory. Prime objective is scores an end phase if a friendly fighter is holding the highest valued objective in enemy territory. If we would have some tech in the deck to like help us swap around objectives, I think 1 glory for this card could be fair. We don't have anything like that, so it's just gonna be toss-up really. But if we are clever in the positioning when setting up the board, we maybe could steer it in such a direction that there aren't more than tops 2 objectives in the enemy territory. Hopefully just 1, right? Because then it will be an auto score if we get onto that objective. But it depends on the opponent if they want to stay on objectives as well, right? So I think it's once again it's a little bit cheap with just 1 glory for such a kind of random card. Swift Work is 2 glory for scores in an end phase if the number of enemy fights out of action is greater than the round number. Yeah. So in the 3rd round we have to have 4 fights out of action. This could be an unscorable card versus a lot of warbands, right? We have a lot of 3-man warbands. I think this should probably read scores in an end phase if the number of enemy fights out of action is equal to or greater than the round number. I think this is a bit hard. And so it's basically unscorable in the late rounds versus elite warbands, and it's going to be very hard to score against teams that raise fighters, like, and especially if they actually earn glory by not having a lot of fights out of action, like the Sepulchral Guard actually does. So this is going to be a really hard objective, and we aren't a warband that deals a lot of damage either, so I'm not sure about the design here, actually. So if we are building a deck, I would probably exclude this one. Without equal, scores in an phase if 2 more enemy fights out of action and your warband holds 1 or more objectives. This is more like it. I kind of like this card. It kind of reminds me of like Bold Deeds and such cards. 2 more enemy fighters out of action. That should be doable. Yeah, sure, there are race warbands and stuff like that, but in like the 2nd and 3rd round, this should be a thing that has been achieved, right? And your warband holds 1 or more objectives. That's also very doable. I think that's a good 2 glory end phase. Fair 2 glory, right? So my caveat here with the objectives here is that the total glory is a little bit low. I think 14 total glory. It's just 1 or 2 glories shy. And yes, sure, aggressive warbands don't need kind of as high total glory as defensive ones, because they are more likely to kill stuff. But still, 14 glory is a bit low for a rival deck, I think. I would like to see in 15 or 16 here. But it is what it is, so let's just work with what we have here. So let's check the ploys then. Etheric Paths is choose a friendly fighter in an edge hex, and more than one hex from each enemy fighter. That's fairly doable. Place that fighter in another hedge hex. Give that fighter one charge token. So as I said, the charge token isn't a great deal because we have 3 fighters, and if all of them have charges, we can activate them again. So this could even like help us speed up the scoring of what's it called? Stormforge Vanguard, which is scored immediately after each surviving friendly fighter has one more move in the charge, and each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory. So if we like get one in our first activation, and then the opponents activate, hopefully don't push us out, then we play that card leading up to our second activation, and then we score that immediately after the second activation. So that's a pretty fast and good way to score that objective. So let's continue here. Ceaseless Volley. Choose a friendly fighter. Push the chosen fighter 1 hex. +1 dice to that fighter's range 3 plus attack actions in the next activation step. This is a great card. So we have +1 dice, and we get to push the chosen fighter 1 hex. So that's a good deal, right? That's a very strong card. Fearsome Roar. Choose an enemy fighter adjacent to one or more friendly fighters. Push the chosen fighter 1 hex. So that could be really useful as well, right? For example, if the enemy just have 1 wound left and that enemy fighter has a range 1 attack, maybe we have brought it down to 1 wound, and then they are about to activate. We push them away. They can't attack us because they might have a move token, whatever, and then we can finish them off with our range in the next round. But it could also help set up that Etheric Paths so that they aren't adjacent, so that card is playable, right? So there should probably be a lot of uses for that card. Next up we have Lightning Blow, which is +1 damage, helps us boost the kind of weak damage output that this team has. +1 damage is quite obvious how useful that could be. Merciless Assault is a reaction that you play after friendly fight's range, successful range 1. That fighter makes a range 3, so that helps us score that Master of the Hand. And it could also help us score a lot of these searches, obviously. Range Advance, choose up to 2 friendly fighters and push each chosen fighter 1 hex. So that's a good kind of wording. Because if this was like Season 1 or 2, it could easily have read choose 2 friendly fighters. And then it could be an unplayable card if we only have 1 fighter. So choosing up to 2 friendly fighters and push each chosen fighter 1 hex. So that's good. That's a good card. Doesn't have any like prerequisite for how we push, and it also helps us get into enemy territory if we need to for scoring other cards. So yeah, obviously a very strong card. Pushes, as I've said in the last installment, is always extremely useful and has a lot of different ways to be used. Right? Next up we have Rapid Volley. Plays after friendly fight's range 3 plus attack action. That fighter makes a range 3 plus attack action that targets the same fighter. Yeah, that could score us Master of the Hun. That could help score us Range Strike. That could help score us Swift Punishment. That could help score us Judgment of Sigmar and Veteran Marksman and what have you. So obviously very, very useful and synergistic card. Next up we have the Raptor Strike, which is choose an enemy fighter within 4 hexes of a friendly leader. Deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. A very strong, reliable ping card. Obviously requires the leader to be alive. It's a good card to include. That 1 damage could bring them down to killable range, and then we could score stuff off. So just pay attention, this is ping damage. This won't help score you any of the searches except Ranger Strike. Scores immediately after your warband takes a second subsequent fighter out of action in the same phase. That doesn't require an attack action, but the other cards kind of do. So just pay attention to that. Retribution, play this after an enemy fight's attack action that dealt damage to a friendly fighter. So it actually has to deal damage. That friendly fighter makes 1 attack action, must target the attacker. Yeah, help score a lot of previous cards I mentioned. Warning Cry, choose a friendly fighter, give the chosen fighter 1 guard token. Not generally a fan of guard tokens. But given that a lot of like the end phases depend on us on being in enemy territory, so get them in first. And then put the guard token on them. Don't waste this card while being in your territory. That's kind of a useless way to use it. Especially since we are already on shields, so getting an extra dodge isn't really all that useful, but being able to not be driven back is very useful for this warband, so use it correctly. Next up we have the upgrades covering fire. When an enemy fighter within 3 hexes of this fighter targets another friendly fighter, this fight supports that friendly fighter. This card has been around before. It is situationally useful. The extra support certainly helps score doing successful attacks and whatnot. So it's not that it's out of uses, but it could be a potentially dead card if the prerequisites for the support doesn't fulfill. Yeah, so probably don't play it leading up to your activation when you actually know you're gonna have use of it. Just the general rule of playing upgrades in the power phase is this: if it's your turn to go next, play offensive upgrades. If it's your turn to defend next, play defensive upgrades. Because I see this mistake done with a lot of new players. When they are about to activate, they play defensive stuff. They don't really need it then. And when it's their turn to defend, they play offensive upgrades. And then the fighter being offensively upgraded might just get killed, and then it's a waste of an upgrade, right? So pay attention to the timing of your upgrade cards. Next up we have Crackling Blades. This fight's range 1, have Grievous and Stagger. Stagger isn't all that fantastic, but given that we need extra accuracy to score cards that need successful attacks, it could be kind of a bit more useful for this warband than other warbands, especially given that most of our fighters needs to hit the target 2 times to bring them down, basically. If we aren't meeting like a lot of 2 wound fighters. Getting Stagger onto them and then finish them off is certainly useful. Grievous, yeah, that helps as well. Farsighted, +1 range. Yeah, I've said before, so that this could give the leader a threat range of 9. That's just crazy. And it's just very good. So this works for both the range 3 attack actions and the range 4 attack actions, because it says +1 range to this fighter's range 3 plus attack actions. And that includes the bird. The bird is the word. Next up we have Hail of Bolts, which gives us a snare. It's not all that useful. Fighters with a dodge characteristic usually benefit from having 2 defense dice, so they are fishing for the crit. They are usually not really looking for the dodge. But it doesn't hurt, but I would have preferred seeing like cleave, yeah. Next up we have Incredible Stamina. Reaction before this fight's activation. Remove 1 move or stagger token from this fighter. You can only use this ability once per round. That's really nice because we could move into enemy territory to be in position, and then we could remove moves, so we could charge after a move. That's obviously very useful. Next up we have Lone Warriors. Rolls of single swords or successes in this fight's defense roll. It's just 1 extra die, but given that we have 2 defense die, it's not useless. Next up we have Overcharged Boltstorm Pistol, which is range 3, 3 hammers, 1 damage with cleave. It's very accurate attack, right? Especially with the cleave. But I would have preferred no cleave and 2 damage, but hey, you can't get everything. Next up we have Swift Stride, +2 move. Yeah, very useful, given that we need to get into the enemy territory and hopefully stay there. So we don't just want to get 1 hex in, because that's very risky, because we could just as easily be pushed into no man's territory. We want to kind of get that extra hex in to stay there as well. Watchful Advance, reaction after this fight's activation, in which this fighter in 1 or more move actions give this fighter 1 guard token. So this could be very useful for this particular warband. So as I said, not generally a fan of guard, but 1 or more move actions, that includes charges. So don't forget that fact. A charge is a move, but a move isn't a charge. So giving a guard after a charge, very useful. Or a move. Aetheric Step gives us the flying trait. That's only for the leader though. Kind of a weird card, but sure. You can move through friendly fights or enemy fighters, or block hexes. Could help us get in position and stay in enemy territory more reliably. It's not amazingly strong though. Okay, so that's the full brunt of the deck. If I am to judge this compared to the Sepulchral God, I think this is quite a bit weaker actually. It requires too many successful attacks. So I would like to see it kind of built with some Nemesis or Championship in mind to kind of just pump in extra accuracy with the deck and kind of maybe boost the damage a bit. Maybe some push tech as well. So, and then it could be decent. But it's too many like successful attacks, killing second fighter, killing someone on objective, killing someone with range 3, critting with range 3. So it's very dice dependent, and the end phase glory is a bit low at 4-1 glory objectives. So I would like to see the total glory bumped up a bit if we are to build this deck. So, but it is what it is, and it's way stronger than it was. So, and the fighter cards have been boosted as well. So if you found this useful, make sure to like the video, hit the bell button, leave a comment on your thoughts on this deck in particular and Underworlds in general. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, help us get to that 1,000 subscriber mark. That would be awesome. Without further ado, take care.